Hello and welcome back, and that's right, it's time for another part in our series of videos where we look at setting up your QNAP NAS right the very first time. And today we're going to focus specifically on Plex Media Server. Plex Media Server is arguably the most popular NAS streaming app out there to turn your network attached storage and those decades of TV shows, movies, photos and music into a comprehensive and incredibly bespoke, flexible and beautiful media server to rival that of Netflix, HBO Max, Disney Plus and the rest of it. And although, as you can see from this list here on screen, I have actually spoken about Plex Media Server a lot on this channel, it's actually been a few years since we went for a setup guide for installing Plex on a QNAP NAS. And in this video, I'm going to go into more detail, reflect on some of the changes that have happened since those previous videos of setting it up. And if you are looking for more information and setting it up right the first time, I strongly recommend checking out this video here, linked in the description, NAS for Plex Media Server, 8 mistakes people make. So after this video of setting it up, make sure you watch that video to learn some of the other mistakes people make when setting it up. But let's go through this from beginning to end. First thing we're going to need to do is head over to the App Center. In the App Center, go to Partners, scroll to the bottom, find Plex Media Server there and click Install when you're ready. But just before you do it, here's our first little thing that I think a number of you should be aware of. Plex, if we select the Developer tab there, a new tab will open up. And on the top right of the screen, we've got the Download section. And then from there, highlight Plex Media Server and select. Now, why are we doing that? Well, because if we go down here and select QNAP, what we need to see immediately is once we choose Package and we go and select the latest version. And again, if you're running an AMD or Intel CPU, go for that one there. And if you're running one of the newer generation QNAPs with an ARM processor, select that one there. But select the 64-bit version, a pop-up will appear, and you can download Plex to your local PC. Why would you do it this way and not just install it from the App Center? Well, as you can see here, this version number here is 1.40.0.7998. Remember that number, 7998. If we head back into Plex here and we look at the latest version, we can see that this is a version from February 2023. This is not the latest version of Plex by any stretch. And although it's been downloaded, Plex in general, over 3 million times on QNAP systems, this is still not the latest version. The reason being that as new updates and revisions are submitted to QNAP for their partners app, they have to be verified. This takes time, and QNAP has a lot of different third and first party apps to go through. So you can go ahead and install it from here if you choose, but I would recommend downloading it manually, and I'm going to show you both of them in this video. But for now, let's go ahead and install the automatic way. Go ahead, select it, you verify this is not a QNAP app, let it install, and later on, when you do need to download either this version, if you want to go for the latest version, or you want to update your version of Plex, and we'll touch on this again later on, all you need to do is download that file as mentioned earlier on, save it on your local machine, go back into your QNAP NAS here, click this icon up here with the plus symbol above it to manually install, zoom out, select browse, finds the file that you downloaded from Plex just now, and then click install that way. That will install the latest version, and that's also what you need to do to install updates for Plex. Unlike applications that are first party from QNAP that have auto update options, Plex doesn't provide that option as it's a third party tool. So moving forward, when updates arrive, and you'll see a notification in Plex to tell you that happens, manually install them. But now we've installed Plex. You would think at this point we can just go ahead and go into Plex, but I don't recommend that immediately, because we want to make sure that when we're accessing Plex, we're doing it in the way that best suits you. Now that can be broken down into two different ways. Number one, in an early part of this series, I talked about the utility and the usefulness of creating multiple users and tailoring the level of access they have. Now, Plex, as useful as it is and as great a tool as it is, you don't want to give Plex too much power, do you? Because If Plex is on a mobile device, it's on a computer, it's on a Fire TV, and somehow by security that gets compromised, either a back-end vulnerability via an attack vector, or someone actually gets in with the user account, the last thing you want is to give that user full access to your NAS. Now, the main ways to go around and avoid that are as follows. One, create a brand new user. We can use one of these ones here, or we can create a brand new user here. And the way you can do with this brand new user, once you've given them a name and a password and all the usual stuff, you can go ahead and edit application privileges. So you can say whether this user can access anything on the system, any other app. You can disable it or enable it as needed. But on top of that, you can change shared folders. Which folders on the system can it access? So you can ensure that this user can only access the folders that have got Plex media inside them. In other words, photos, music, audio, video, media, whatever. And you can even ensure that they have only read-only access. So it can access that media, which is what you want, but it can't write data or edit the data. Now be careful, if you create an account and give it read-only access, and later on you want to create custom playlist, custom transcoding, where you can transcode stuff in advance and have it in the same directory as the original file, scraping metadata and stuff like that, and you want to save it locally, that requires write access to add it to the same directory. So be wary of doing read-only access if that sounds like something you're going to do. Or alternatively, you can just create a whole group on its own that's only for Plex or only for multimedia. So that means you could create this one account that can only access Plex, only access Video Station, only access QMaggie for photos, only access Music Station, etc, etc. The other thing you're going to want to do to ensure security, if you don't want to create a brand new account, is go into the Shared Folders tab. You can access it here via the control panel or via the File Station application. Simply select the option there at the top and select Shared Folder to create a new shared folder, but it'll also allow you to access existing shared folders. So if we do make our way into the Shared Folders area, what we need to do is go to the folder that we know the media that we're going to be using for Plex resides within. In my case, that's going to be the multimedia folder there, and there's my Plex data, 8K media files, 4K and more. So from there, within those folders, heading in will show you those available shared folders, and from there we select the folder that we know our multimedia resides within. In my case, that is the multimedia folder here. It's got my 4K, 8K and Plex Media Server multimedia, and from there you can go ahead and change the permissions to different assigned users. So that gives you a good level of access and control over who can access what. And you can change a lot of the other stuff about changing some of the individual settings on the go, but just bear in mind that by doing so, if you sever access for a Plex assigned user to that account, to that shared folder, you won't be able to re-establish it very easily, and then you have to go through the whole scraping of metadata once again. So now we've done that, now we can head into Plex. Now I've got a Plex pass, so if I go ahead and select Plex there, a new tab will open and it will ask to assign this Plex Media Server device to my existing Plex account. You'll need to have opened up an account. It is completely free. If you want to use some of the advanced features of Plex, some of which I'll talk about later on, you will require a Plex pass, and that includes hardware transcoding as well. But for now, once you've logged in with your Plex account, click sign in, and then you'll be able to bind that Plex Media Server account, Plex account with your Plex Media Server QNAP. Now, the page you're seeing here can sometimes hang. Give it 30 to 60 seconds. The reason it hangs is it's trying to bounce off Plex's remote server to authenticate your account and bind this device and your account. This is done a second time later on, but the result is everything from pop-up blockers to your own ISP can lead to issues with disestablished connections. So if you don't get a response after about 30 to 60 seconds, simply refresh the tab, and as you can see, that works. And now we can start binding our individual folders for our multimedia. Select got it. name your server what you want to call it. I'm going to leave it as it is. I might just put the word Plex on the end for the hell of it. And remember that if you do want to attempt Plex access from outside of your own home account, you can enable that option there, or untick if you want to keep everything on the LAN. Later on, I'll tell you an even easier way to access media on the LAN with as low a footprint as possible. Again, this page can take 30 to 60 seconds to click on if you have allowed access to your media outside of your home, but do not refresh this tab. Let this one take its sweet time. The reason being, as this tab is establishing that connection, and breaking that might be problematic later on. As you can see, it finishes, and now we're going to add a media library. Go ahead and select the appropriate media library, and I'll do 2 or 3 of these and then skip ahead after they're done. Go ahead and select the folder, then click the add folder option after selecting the type of media. Select browse media folder and select where on the QNAP NAS your media lives. Now the directories you choose are going to change depending on the storage pools that you've created and the volume. So for example, I've got multiple volumes here. Consequently, that cache dev is the only one I've given Plex to. But the more folders and shared folders you assign and give it access to, the harder it's going to be to find. But generally you will find on a QNAP that cache dev is going to be that first volume. But if you've named them all individual names, that will change. Go ahead and select the folders where your media lives. So for me in that movie, select the specific folder, click add, and then from there, select advanced. Now for most users, only a couple of options here that are going to be important. Also, some of these options are applicable only to a Plex Pass account. So the scanner, you want to use the default Plex Media, because unless you're going to be using bespoke files, Plex Movie Scanner, it'll be absolutely fine. When it comes to the agent, generally, in most other cases, I would look at some of these other ones, but at the very least for Plex, you can go ahead with either Plex Movie or the Movie Database options there. You will find the Movie Database tends to have more metadata and definitely custom metadata as well. Definitely with TV shows as well. But for now, leave it at Plex Data. From there, these are options that allow you to change the presentation, whether you want early trailers, whether you want to change some of the certification there, whether you want to show certain kinds of things, adult content. All of this is restrictive of the entire folder that you're applying these to. But when you're done, go ahead and select Add to Library. Then select another option. So for example, you can select music. And with music, you can go ahead, crawl your music data, as I'm doing here, into Plex Data, Music, and it will also crawl for scraped metadata from databases for music albums as well. So for example, use the Plex Music Scanner. Agent, you can go with Last.fm or personal media rights for custom box art. And again, lots of presentation options there as well. And if you're someone that takes your music quite seriously, you might want to look in some of these options, as well as looking at some of the DLNA options as well. And of course, you can also use photos, where AI photo recognition will be utilized as well. So you can add your photo data as well into it. And that's really it. You get the gist of everything we're doing here and just how straightforward it is, adding them all one by one. What I'll do now is I'll fast forward to adding a few of these extra options here for us. And once they're done, bring you back in for us to continue. Once those are done, go ahead and click Next. Now, depending on the device you're going to be utilizing to enjoy your media from the comfort of your sofa, the comfort of the train seat that you're commuting to work, you're going to need those apps in most cases. So you can go ahead and select Get Plex Apps, and it will take you back to that download section, but this time for the apps and devices. I do recommend, if you are going to be utilizing your Plex Media Server NAS across a multitude of different users and devices, get a Plex Pass. I know it costs money, and you can get a one-off membership for about 100 NICA that's on offer regularly, but that means that some applications, like some of the mobile applications and harder supported ones, are free. Otherwise, they have a nominal one-off cost to give full access, whereas if you have a Plex Pass account, you can download every single client app and use them all to the fullest of their extent. And again, you can download them directly here or via respective app centers. Next up, decide if you have multiple Plex servers, which one's going to be the primary. So I'm just going to select this one for now. And finally, it will ask you what you want to see on your home screen. Now, unsurprisingly, all of the albums and collections we've selected are going to be listed, but at the bottom, you will find these third-party ones, such as Tidal Music, which is their alternative to Apple Music, Amazon Music, Spotify, and it is included with PlexPass. So if you want to use that, leave it there. But if you don't, and you don't want to use any of the ad-funded TV shows that they include in it, you can remove them all. And if you're not going to use the live TV packages with a digital TV tuner, again, disable it there. That will show you all of the files and folders that you want to use on your Plex Media server without none of the chaff taking up the screen. Then click Finish, and it will get ready to start scraping that metadata. Now, it will invite for you to utilize the extra paid service to get better metadata agents for more unique metadata. It's done faster. There is just a better extensive range in one place, but you don't need it. I wouldn't go for it, to be personally honest. I've not really seen the huge benefits. Now, I mentioned earlier on about those updates. Remember? Well, up here, if you wish, that will be where it shows your latest server update. Remember, it will not automatically update. You will need to manually download these. So stay on top of those updates, and you can receive notifications in the settings menus of your Plex Media server to get those notifications, if need be, via email. Pretty important, and just make sure that you get those to get the latest security updates. And again, remember, you're going to have to download them directly from that link there. When it's downloaded, head back into your QNAP, head back into the App Center, head back into the 4 boxes with the plus symbol at the top, and then from there, go ahead and upload that new update onto your QNAP NAS there. Now, what about when you want to enjoy your media? We can already tell from here, here's our user interface. If we want to select a file, there's all the metadata. It's already started scraping there in the background. We can play it, we can transcode it, we can do all of that stuff there. However, there are some background things I think it's worth knowing about. So if we make our way into the QNAP Plex here, we're going to Manage Server and then Settings. Some of the smaller things you should look into that are quite important are as follows. Number one, a lot of users aren't aware that you can actually access your Plex Media server device via Universal Plug and Play, UPnP or DLNA. What that means is, rather than utilizing a device that has the Plex app installed, maybe you're using a device that doesn't have it available on the App Center. Maybe you're using an old HDMI TV with no App Center and no means to introduce any third-party apps. Well, as long as it supports media servers, and that is to say that the NAS will appear on your local area network, you can completely forego and bypass Plex's interface by just going down here, selecting the option DLNA, and then select Enable DLNA Service. Clicking Save Changes means that now this NAS will appear. If we go into our computer settings here, we can go up here, select Access Media, select Connect to a Media Server. It will scan our local area network, and as you can see, boom, it's now found the Plex NAS, which you can then click Next. It will then add that Plex Media Server NAS to our range of available servers on the local area network, and then from there we can access our folders just like we would when we had a mapped network drive or using a DLNA media server there. It just adds it to our range of services, which means we can now access this device without having to go through the Plex app. We can just go straight in and play our music if we choose through those albums. A very useful add-on. Talking of useful add-ons, we got to talk about it. Transcoding, this option down here. Now, the first thing you're going to notice with this is there's not a lot of options. Head up and make sure to tap that Show Advanced. It will pay dividends. Now, transcoding, typically, if you are using a CPU that has integrated graphics, that is a Intel Pentium, an Intel Celeron, an Intel Core. Then you've got the newer generation of, say, Alder Lake, the N100, the N95, the N300. All of those CPUs and many, many more, older generation and new, arrive with something called integrated graphics. That is to say that you've got a whole CPU with multiple clocks and threads and power, but it has a small component on board that is specialized towards handling graphics. Now, what that means is that if a file is too big, so it's an 8K version, and you want to watch that 8K file on a mobile phone, or it's a file format compression or codec that is not supported by the destination device, again, a tablet, a phone, a TV, whatever, then you can the system can request that the file is changed. That is called server-side conversions or server-side transcoding. It also applies to audio as well when you're using more complex audio. It's one thing to buy the latest copy of Avatar in 8K, but you don't want on the other side of the world on a mobile phone sitting on a beach to convert that to watch an 8K file on a mobile or a limited data connection. Transcoding is useful, but if you don't have integrated graphics or you're not using integrated graphics, when you convert that file, you're going to be using raw power to get the job done, which is inefficient, which uses more system resources than it needs, and can all too often result in slower performance. And when you are transcoding a file, a media file, that is playing every second, what you don't want is it to take longer than 1 second to convert 1 second of footage, because it's never going to play. So make sure, if you have a CPU that has transcoding, it has integrated graphics, to select make my CPU hurt. You don't have to, but the other options have a tendency to open the door towards something called software transcoding, and that is when you're using the general CPU power to get the job done. Whereas hardware transcoding will use that dedicated element of the CPU designed for the reshaping of multimedia and graphics to do the job. It will do it quicker, it will do it with less power use, and just do a better job, ultimately resulting in the conversion of the transcoding being a lot quicker than actual playback. Now, some systems in later updates of Plex also present the option, if you have multiple transcoding engines or hardware accelerated engines on your system, choosable. So if you were using a QNAP, for example, with a graphics card installed and the CPU also has integrated graphics, you can decide, depending on the CPU and the graphics card, to actually use the graphics card rather than the CPU, or use the CPU and not the graphics card. If you have those options, a new option will appear here under Use Hardware Acceleration when available, to select which hardware engine you want to do the job, which is only a relatively recent change, and one that I strongly recommend you look into if you're running multiple transcoding engines. Next up, as you add multimedia to your Plex media server, you're going to want it to scrape that metadata. You're going to want it to index. You're going to add that media regularly. Now, this can be done in 2 ways for it to be automatic. Number 1, go into the Agents tab, or sorry, the Library tab there, and make sure to check the option Scan My Library Automatically. And this means that as soon as a change is recognized, so one of the folders that it's crawling has now changed in its scope, its file numbers or whatever, it will automatically trigger Plex to start re-indexing and looking for new thumbnails. If you don't trust that enough, then what you can do is go down to Scheduled Tasks. And in Scheduled Tasks, you can go ahead and choose for individual tasks to take place on a regular basis, maybe at 1 AM when everyone's asleep. I don't know your life. But what that means is, if you've got files being moved around, or you're deleting files, or new files are constantly being downloaded and added, this is a very useful way to optimize and upgrade your databases all the time, but also remove the dead wood. Maybe you've got some old scraped and metadata you don't need anymore because you've deleted the original file. Scheduling it will ensure the job gets done, but also make sure to remember while doing this to, every single time, scroll to the bottom and save changes. Another recommendation I would make is, if you are utilizing your Plex Media Server QNAP NAS for other things, then do maybe, particularly if you're going to have people accessing the NAS externally outside of your network and oversaturating the network, perhaps even on the local area network too, bond the Plex Media Server to a specific port. Go into the Network tab, scroll to the bottom, and where it says Preferred Network Interface, click it, and it will list every single network interface currently on your system, be they physical or even virtual, if you've got them on there from VMs or the virtual network switch. And you can physically select a specific port. Now, why would you do that? Well, that means that you have now got one connection between the QNAP and your router or switch, that just for Plex Media Server, it's now got the full bandwidth to play with. Not only does that mean that oversaturation and over access to your Plex Media Server is not going to impinge upon other users who may be using it for backups, virtual machine surveillance or whatever, but also vice versa, it won't mean that they impact the full amount of bandwidth afforded to Plex. Unlike backups, which can be incremental or differential, which means a whole backup can actually be in smaller little chunks over a period of time. When you're watching a movie, there is a natural flow. And if there is a gap or a drop in the network connectivity, you're going to know immediately. And a file may break, it may pixelate, or it may cease playing. That's why dedicating it and bonding it to a physical connection can be very useful. But just make sure to note that you have to attach multiple connections, either via virtual or physical connections, in order to establish this one for Plex, this one for backups, this one for surveillance, etc., etc. Finally, what about when you're giving access to your server to lots of different family members or friends, and you need to manage that, maybe even clip the wings or fully remove some users? Well, managing media access here on the left governs most of that. It allows you to, with someone's email address, give them access where they'll either need to set up a new Plex account or associate their existing one. If you've got multiple users, they'll be listed on this tab. Now, what if one of those members abuses that access? What if you give them access and they start adding it to all of their devices, or even their friends, and give them access? How do you know that they're doing that, and how do you clip their wings? Well, go to authorized devices, and from here it will list every single device that is either currently or has had access to that Plex media server. So if we go in, and this is when we've been using association with physical devices with Plex, we can disassociate devices easily. And this works in both directions, by the way. We can say, right, I never want that device to have access to my Plex as the client device, but also associated server devices. We can kill all of those off one by one, and it ensures that we can maintain and keep clear and secure our Plex media server NAS. But there you go. This has been setting up Plex on a QNAP NAS in 2024, moving forward with all the extra options. If you want to learn more, as mentioned, we've covered this subject a lot. We've bench tested practically every accessible QNAP NAS suitable for Plex over the last 3, maybe even 4 years. So if you're wondering about a specific QNAP, don't be surprised if you find it in one of our guides. We've also done idiots guides, setup guides, recommendations, and more, all listed below. If that's not enough, head over to NAS Compares, where not only have we got the free advice section that I'll talk about in just a moment, but also the NAS Builder. The NAS Builder will allow you, if you want, to know what is the best NAS for your needs. Example, what if what you want is a 4-bay NAS, you want a 4-bay NAS that's got, that has 12 terabytes, you want to know that it's got 4 bays, you want to make sure it can have 1 disk of failure protection, so 1 disk of RAID redundancy, and your budget is, let's say, £500. Not a lot of money, right? You also want to access Plex. How many users you want to access? We'll say 1 to 5, and there's other options too, but click Find NAS, and you're able to find out that right now, that is the only NAS from QNAP, Synology, TerraMaster, Asustor, and we're adding more brands and DIY solutions too soon that suit your needs. This is the only way you're going to have those configuration options there available to you as a Plex Media Server NAS. And again, you can configure those options very, very easily. It even tells you just how much data you can store on it within those parameters. If you want to up the budget, for example, to 750, go ahead, refresh, and it introduces new devices from, say, Synology, Asustor, and more, and tells you just how much you can use it. Just go ahead and select the price there. It will take you to Amazon or another retailer, and if you do intend to use that shop anyway, why not use that link? It results in a small fee coming back to me and Eddie here at NAS Compares, and we get to keep doing what we do. It's just us. But if you need free advice, go ahead to the free advice tab. Not only is there our Discord and recommended first and third party forums along with subreddits, but also for free advice within 3 to 5 working days from me and Eddie, use the free advice section here, or if you want expedited support within 24 hours, use Ko-Fi or our Ask.NAS Compares forum, or head over to NAS Compares Ko-Fi or Patreon for not only access to our membership tier, where you can get expedited support regularly, early access to content, our monthly Zoom and more, or you can go ahead to our services tab and get access to Zoom consultations with either me or Eddie to help you along the way. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next stage in these videos.